Hello, I'm Paul Gates. Welcome to this week's episode of The Academics. Joining me today are our regular panelists, Professor Heather Page Preston and Dr. Dave Spiceland. This week we'll be discussing substance abuse and the substance temptations and possible resulting addictions facing college students today. The Academics' very own Faith Hatton will be giving us a bit of insight into this particular problem facing today's younger generation.
For many young adults, the transition into adulthood begins in college. After moving out, college students between the ages of 18 to 22 get their first experience living without parental oversight or guidance, and unfortunately, many also get unhindered exposure to various substances. In a study conducted by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration in partnership with the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 1.2 million full-time college students reported to drinking alcohol on an average day. In that same survey, over 700,000 full-time college students reporting to using marijuana on any day, and over 11,000 full-time college students also reported to using cocaine. Other drugs included in the survey include hallucinogens, heroin, and inhalants. The Department of Wellness and Prevention's own Mr. Asma and Yasmin Ramadan sat down to discuss addictions in students.
Most common forms would be alcohol and other drug use. We do see some students with pornography addiction as well as gambling concerns, sex, and food and eating addictions. However, alcohol and drug use is by far the most prevalent concerns that we see.
Age as well as exposure are important factors regarding forming an addiction to a substance.
The age that the person first started using, that definitely plays a role, as well as how often the person is using.
So if somebody used one time at the age of 15 and then they didn't use again until 17, probably not that big of a factor. But if somebody started, say, using marijuana pretty consistently at the age of 15, then it's really, say, become a part of their brain development, and it's become a part of the wiring of the brain. And so that reward system is very powerful, and so students are more likely, or anyone is more likely to basically develop the disease of addiction if they started the use of substances prior to the age of 21. For instance, opiates or opioids, so like what we're seeing across the nation now and have been seeing for a number of years with like Oxycontin, Percocets, some substances like that. Consistent use for the period of 2 to 3 weeks can create a level of physical dependence, meaning that you would start to go through withdrawals once you cease taking that medication, and typically it's the withdrawals that basically make a student or make an individual seek to continue that use, because withdrawals are very uncomfortable, a lot of like sickness, just discomfort that encourage one to continue that use. And so from that physical dependence perspective, a student can, say, essentially be addicted to that drug very, very quickly.
Early exposure to substances can lead to physical, emotional, and even chemical dependence on them, which can lead to forming lifelong habits. According to the Wellness Department, 2 critical steps with dealing with addiction are identifying and educating oneself.
First step is like a student identifying that there is some level of concern or problem with how the substance use is affecting their life. So really that's just the acknowledgement that substances may be giving me more of a negative outcome than a positive outcome when it really comes down to like that pro and con balance. Typically students or anyone in general do not use substances because they don't like them or that they're not doing something good for them. You know, the issue exists when a student realizes there is this positive aspect, but really the negative is outweighing it. The consequences are starting to really impair my overall quality of life that are outweighing the positives that the substances are bringing to me. It's really seen as it's a chronic disease. It's a disease of the brain. It's well outside of someone's choice. There's a huge difference between recreational use, that I may engage in use every once in a while for social reasons, for fun, compared to that constant use, that constant craving or desire to use a substance based on the wiring of my brain. That my reward system is set up to seek drugs or alcohol as opposed to fulfillment in other avenues such as social interactions, academic performance, other hobbies and activities.
When students do come in here, we just like to have like conversations, so like open conversations like about the use, really for them to pretty much gain a better understanding and knowledge of like what it is that they are putting in their body. So I know that sometimes students will have like this misconception of like if they do come in here that we're like promoting to not use substances. but really we just want students to be able to understand what it is that they're putting in their body and how it is really affecting them. So really having that psychoeducation piece when coming into wellness and prevention services.
Substance use and abuse are serious matters facing students today, and Appalachian State does offer resources to help those who may be suffering through it. More information will be coming up on the Wellness and Prevention Center after a discussion from our panelists, but for now, reporting for the academics, I'm Faith Hatton.
Thank you, Faith. Let's start with talking about how students are affected in our experience by substances ranging from alcohol to harder drugs, both legal and legal. I mean, we've got quite a range here between, say, alcohol and heroin, and one being legal at one end and the other being illegal, but both, and the ones in between, subject to abuse.
Yeah, well, Leo, one being legal on one end, but after you reach a certain age.
Well, that's true, of course.
So illegal use of it, of a legal substance.
Since we are talking about college students,
Yeah,
we should point that out, that about half are on the illegal side and half on the legal side.
There are a lot of ramifications of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs of any type, and it can range from an inability to get up and go to class, or once you're in class, an inability to process information, so stunted cognitive abilities. How about suppressing your immune system? Students get sick all the time.
Even without drugs.
Even without the drugs. And if your immune system's suppressed, you are at much greater odds of catching whatever little bug's going around, and it can do some serious damage. I found some numbers that were very frightening. When alcohol's involved in terms of health-related issues, more than 150,000 students report health issues that are alcohol-related. When you have alcohol in sexually charged situations, it's resulted in more than 97,000 reports of sexual assault in a year's time. When you have students who are behind the wheel of an automobile, traffic accidents obviously are part of that scenario. And when you look at just alcohol-related deaths, it's almost 2,000 a year in the U.S. for alcohol-related deaths. So I'm not even looking at any other drug use.
And is that looking at accidents too, or is that just the medical results of alcoholism?
Yes. Well, it wasn't very clear. It just said that alcohol-related deaths in the U.S. for college-age students, and it did not make a distinction in terms of accidents versus. It did make a distinction about the health-related issues. It did pull that out. So anything that resulted from death that was health-related was separate. Right. Yeah. So the number's actually greater.
Yep.
And getting back to we as teachers, I've had other teachers tell me that they smell beer on the breath of students, et cetera, which, I mean, legally, we're not giving some sort of a test, but I've always suspected that there's something out there, and I'm talking about an 8 o'clock in the morning class. Why are you drinking a beer, before an 8 o'clock class? And I don't know. But does it impede their work? Possibly. I had a student that came to my office some years ago and sat down. He said, "I'm an alcoholic." Now the thing about it is, we're not experts, and I am not going to try to counsel them. That's not what we're trained to do. But I suggested that he go to the counseling center, which he did, and he came back about a year or two later and wanted a reference from me. And I said, "How's it going?" And he said, "Good." He said, I've taken care of it or whatever. And I've heard if you're an alcoholic the rest of your life, and it's something you have to be careful about. So there's those kinds of issues, even as something, I was going to say as innocent as alcohol, but when we were younger, all of us, alcoholism was something you laughed at. It was the Andy Griffith show, the guy that would check himself into the and they laughed about it. And I don't find that in the media. We don't laugh about alcoholics anymore, and I think that's good.
Well, it's very good.
Well, I think in the past 50 years or so since, the Andy Griffith show was on, we've come to realize that it's serious, and there are a lot of ramifications that sexual assault, it was never connected to that 50 years ago.
Yeah.
and the health aspects are more obvious now than certainly they were then.
And the alcohol has gotten even stronger than what it was. It's more than just a beer or wine. You know, it can be some pretty hard stuff.
Oh, sure.
Same with the drugs that students have access to, and they also have access to a greater variety of drugs. So the potency of traditional drugs like marijuana has increased over time, and just the access to prescription drugs. All of the attention deficit disorder drugs, Ritalin, Adderall, those play a role.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now we're into talking about the illegal use of legal drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a whole different area. You know, there's certainly among college students, most, maybe not most of all, but they sell their prescriptions. You know, I mean, they have roommates that borrow
Some
them,
do.
and friends that
Yes.
borrow
Yeah.
them, and then they sell them.
Well,
and
I was going to say it's interesting that you bring that up because you know, the numbers for this are really frightening once you make them very personal. So if we look at an average of about 12.5 million full-time college students, the estimate in the U.S. it's 12.4, but once you get that close, you might as well do 12.5, right? And I just used 18,000, very close to our population when you factor everyone in. And of those 12.5 million, 60% state that they drink regularly during a month, and regularly it varied at least 3 times a week. So 60% of 18,000 would be 10,800 students at Appalachian State who drink regularly. A third of them report binge drinking, and that's the lowest number I can find, a third. So if we apply it to our numbers, that's almost 6,000 students. It's 59 plus, or 5,900 plus. A fifth of them report illicit drug use. So that would be 3,600 students who are using illicit drugs.
And this is self-reported data.
It
Chances
is.
are it's a lot more than what's being
Yeah.
reported.
Yeah.
sure, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the population, we can look at the percentages based on the population, but we've got to be aware that these are on probably the lower end of what would be statistically significant.
Yeah.
And taking it a rung down, you know, the members of the Latter-day Saints, sometimes called Mormons, and I'm not an LDS member myself, but a fervent member of the LDS Church will avoid caffeine, which, I mean, we joke about I have to have my caffeine in the morning. So there are some people who say, look, what I put in my body, I don't want anything that affects my decision making.
Yeah, and
Not all adhere to that, by the way. But
no, that's right. But affecting decision making, even something like caffeine. I mean, that's kind of the point of caffeine, is to amp you up and give you some sort of
And
extra,
that's the point of some of these
extra
drugs
boost.
as
well.
well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the
Help you stay up all night and study for that big test.
which you should have before that particular point. Which,
Yeah.
of course, we never did that when we were
Yeah,
younger. But
yeah.
and that high for things like caffeine or no-dose or whatever, you know, when you are on the downside of that, it can mess you up for days.
Sure can.
yeah. It's not just the use; it's the withdrawal and so forth. And we touched on this, but the legal aspects of drug use, we talked about mostly, you know, physical and psychological and things like that. But the legal aspects, I mean, the penalties are severe. You know, there's the campus system, of course, that handles those kinds of problems. But given a particular set of facts or setting for the use, we're talking about law enforcement now. We're not just talking about campus judiciary, but we're talking about the real criminal justice
Oh
system.
yeah, there's a lot at stake if you make really bad decisions with what you're putting in your system. Off the top of my head, I don't know North Carolina's blood alcohol content limit, but
0.08.
yeah, but we're actually one of the stricter states in terms of what can happen to you.
Yeah.
And there's an interactive map you can go to online and check that. If you're caught drinking first offense, you can have your license suspended. They can confiscate your vehicle if you're too much over the limit. And this is going to be something that's on your record forever. And I know people always threaten that, right? It's going to be on your permanent record. Well, this case, it will be. And good luck trying to get jobs if you've been arrested for illegal drug use. Good luck trying to get a job if it's any sort of organization that tests for drug use.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's something else. And I've heard that toothpaste, that if you use toothpaste, that some of these things it'll show up positive. I don't know. Maybe that's just one of those.
I don't know. We might have to fact check that one.
That, probably so. But more and more employers, though, are checking for illegal drugs, lifestyle issues. I mean, checking Facebook pages, that kind of thing. So.
Well, and that's not just because they're worried about everybody's health and safety, although we hope they are, but if they fail to do that, they may be liable should this employee do something impaired that causes injury to somebody else. I mean, we see this mostly, I think, in truck drivers, over-the-road truck drivers, railroad conductors, things like that. That's at least what we've seen in the news. But there may be some serious financial liability for a company that neglects to do that.
Well, that's just it. It's not just the companies, it's the families who bear the burden of students who come and make bad decisions and get into trouble. Lawyers' fees, restitution, all sorts of financial difficulties families can find themselves in.
Well, now that we've identified some of the problems, Annie Jones will give us a look at resources available for students with substance issues right here on campus.
College life is so amazing, but sometimes we as students find ourselves in some situations and we just need a helping hand. No fear. Here at Appalachian State, we have a place known as the Student Wellness Center. It is free of charge and they promote healthy and active lifestyles. Let's check it out.
The Department of Wellness and Prevention Services is an on-campus center dedicated to encouraging a healthy and active lifestyle for all students. Offering a number of services and resources, the department works with students to engage in the 8 dimensions of wellness. The department is a valuable resource to students who may be struggling with alcohol or substance abuse, dietary or eating disorders, and mental wellness. Renee Porter, an administrative support specialist, works face-to-face with students to help them with any problems they may have.
First of all, I welcome them. I've got a family history of substance abuse, so I feel drawn to this type of work. I love the students on campus. We call them clients, and I think they kind of feel that. Some of them come in hesitant, some of them come in really upset. They don't want to be here because somebody's telling them they've been ticketed for drinking or substances, and they're just mad because, number one, they've gotten caught, number two, now they're in all this trouble. They're worried that their parents are going to find out, but we're strictly confidential. We can't release any information unless we have a release from the client first. Most of our services, I would say, are alcohol and substance abuse counseling. If a student gets ticketed for alcohol or substance abuses, whether it be on or off campus, then they're mandated to come through our office for 2 counseling sessions at the very most. Sometimes it's just 1 if it's a minor offense.
The center is located in the Miles Anna Student Building on 614 Howard Street, right beside the post office on campus, and is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They can also be reached online at wellness.appstate.edu. Reporting for the academics, I'm Annie Jones.
Thank you, Annie. To close the show this week, Heather Preston will give us a few facts on hemp, a variety of the cannabis sativa plant species that is used for industrial uses.
All right, well, although commonly misconstrued to be the exact same thing due to both being of the species Cannabis sativa, hemp and marijuana are in fact different. The scientific difference between the two lies in the purpose the strain was bred for. Hemp is a strain of Cannabis sativa that has been bred for use in clothing, construction, topical ointments, and even paper. Marijuana is a slang term used to describe strains that were grown specifically for their potent glands that grow in the flowers and some leaves and that are used strictly for intoxication.
That's our time for today. I'm Paul Gates. We hope you'll join us next time on The Academics.